He's not in here. He's not in here. Whoa. That just fucking move?
You can get used to anything. Over time, the exposure to certain elements in horror media can stop being something that's actively frightening and fade into something that you're accustomed to. It doesn't stop your enjoyment. Horror can still always be enjoyed for what it shows on the screen. Everyone loves a good gory time, but the tension of the first viewing, the mystery of what will happen next, is something that can really only hit as hard as possible once, which to some is the enjoyment. The idea of going back and watching something or playing something so many times can increase your appreciation for how it's crafted. Like the subtle intricacies of the time gaps in John Carpenter's The Thing, where you try and spot the points where the characters disappear and figure out who's the infected. To something like Hell House LLC, which has a lot of subtle moments that happen in the background that you might not notice the first time around. But regardless of this, repeated viewings are one of the many things that sucks the fear out of the media. Predictability kills the mystery, and a lot of fear is based on the unknown. It's pretty basic stuff, but horror relies heavily on anticipation and tension for a lot of its jump scares to work. When you know something is coming, waiting for it can still be agonizing. But knowing exactly when and how it's going to get you has diminishing returns. Though the slow reveal of shocking concepts, plot twists, and disgusting, gory moments are still things to expect as well, but nearly all of these have the same common enemies. Let's start off with desensitization. It's arguably the worst and most egregious. It's when a game or movie does the same thing quickly, or fails to change or deviate from the same setup, and the result can be apathy, boredom, or frustration. I always use the same example of the gore in Outlast 2. It's a very gory game, and so was the original. And whilst both leaned pretty hard into gore, the way that it's presented in Outlast 2 always managed to leave me feeling numb, unlike the original, which felt shocking but never pushed me to apathy. It's important to state the obvious though, that desensitization happens differently to everyone, presents in different ways, and for me, sometimes it happens very quickly, sometimes it doesn't happen at all. If I start seeing patterns, I get used to them, or recognize them from other things, and the charm or the shock of something has been defeated before it's had its chance to play its hand. Some of these examples will therefore be very subjective. Outlast 2 lost me around the middle, mainly because of its relentless presentation of its gore and depravity. The bodies and various tortured corpses, disgusting diary entries, and viscera are prevalent even from the very start. The first corpse you see in Outlast 2 is your own helicopter pilot who's been skewered, tied up, and burnt. And this happens literally at the start of the game. It's barbaric, but after walking through a village filled with death, houses that use bodies as decorations, piled up corpses that were thrown into wells, human remains tied up like dried meat and put on shelves, walking into a room and seeing a row of child-sized coffins, the shock of what I was seeing faded until it becomes normal. I just didn't care anymore. For me, it came to a point where the sheer amount of death being thrown at me stopped being this horrible, inhumane act of savagery and just became set dressing. You can be presented with a lot of shocking things, but you can't be expected to process them all equally. And maybe it's a commentary on the human condition that I saw several pikes with human intestines trailed along them, but I'd already got to the point where I only stopped to film them for the video. It didn't mean anything anymore. Going back to Outlast 1 and why it didn't manage to inflict the same feeling of apathy, It's surprisingly simple to justify. The mass graves in the game were very rare, bodies were still fresh. A lonely corpse laying face down in a sewer is still upsetting, or at least a little sad. It paints a picture of someone who tried to escape or got in a fight and didn't make it. Who knows? Maybe the irony of seeing so many corpses in Outlast 2 was that it was just dehumanizing. There's no story to the wide majority of them, it's just death, and you've seen that before. Shock value always wanes over time and frequency, that goes without saying, but horror isn't always about shock value, as it can be about putting you out of your depth, making you feel weak and vulnerable, or trying to disorientate you and make you lose your grip on reality. Which brings us to the doors that lead to different locations in Layers of Fear. You walk through it and it takes you to a room, as a door does, and you walk back through it and it takes you to an entirely different room than the one you originated from. The first time you opened a door that previously went somewhere else to find yourself somewhere new, it was surprising, intriguing, a mechanic that at the time felt fresh and interesting. But the returns on such a mechanic will always get less and less impressive until the novelty has completely worn off. It's just a case of something special becoming something normal. The Haunting in Connecticut 2 has the most number of jump scares of any film rated on Where's the Jump, but it's still a 90-minute film. I've mentioned it before because after watching it, I personally walked away barely noticing or remembering very few of the jump scares simply because there were so many in such a short amount of time, and most of them ended up not standing out. Overexposure is overexposure. You can't expect the jump scares to land every time, and the more you try and put into a brief period of time, the more misses you'll probably have. Emily Wants to Play is one of my least favourite horror games simply because the premise is simple but easy to fail, and the result of failing it every time is a jump scare. You're in Emily's home with a bunch of supernatural dolls. Each one has a different requirement. One only moves when you aren't looking at it, one makes you stand still, and the other chases you. These sometimes conflict or spawn in rooms where there's nowhere to run, or simply catch you awkwardly, and the result every time is a jump scare. Which for the first few times worked okay, but the more you struggle against the game, the more you get jump scared until it's more tolerable to take your headphones off and try again. No more annoying jump scares. This goes past the point of desensitization and straight into annoyance, at least for me. The point is that novelty fades, overuse is overused, and some things just become annoying. You can't expect the same tactic to work forever. Familiarity, however, is different. Instead of a piece of horror media wearing you out quickly, familiarity is part of predictability. That click where even if you've never played this game before, you feel like you know what's going to happen. As mentioned earlier, horror is a very formulaic genre. For a lot of it to work properly, you need to have a layer of tension, and then you expect the game or movie to capitalize on that tension by either making you jump, intensifying it with a shocking realization, or letting it taper out or even deflate with a fake out, where it dissolves and you're allowed to relax. Setups in horror games and movies are often very similar. It's a pattern you can learn to predict, even if you aren't really trying. Say you have a long corridor. As the player, you can't see it without feeling a sense of foreboding. You don't always know why, but it'll feel like a trap. There's no way something won't happen in an environment like this, and logically, As the game developer, what's the point of putting in a really long corridor where nothing happens? You're just wasting player time and killing the atmosphere with boredom if all they have to do is hold forwards the entire time. So something has to happen in this corridor for it to even justify existing. The smashing walls in Dead Space, the eerie foreboding feeling of the endless stairs in Silent Hill 2. This is just an example, but now when you see a long corridor, you associate it with an area where something will happen. And this sort of thing carries over to other tropes. Nobody versed in horror who's ever seen a slasher movie where the main antagonist seemingly dies halfway through will really believe that that antagonist is dead. It's not only anticlimactic, it's just not very fun. No sensible horror film would leave you with so much runtime without the primary antagonist, without at least finding something equally scary to replace them. It stops being a horror film when the danger goes away, but at the same time, it's not hugely surprising to see the antagonist that had supposedly died return later. But even though you know they aren't dead, it doesn't mean you stop having fun. Like a pantomime, even the audience plays their part. And that's the crux of the problem with consuming too much horror media. Instead of a piece of media luring you into its trap, there's a good chance it plays out exactly how you expect it to. It's mainly a problem just because of how derivative the genre is. A lot of scares and events are similar because they work universally or are taken from things that worked in the past. When you play Dead Space, you'll eventually learn that enemies who are seemingly dead will get up and attack you. This is also the same for the zombies in Resident Evil. It can be startling, but these games don't tend to put enemy corpses anywhere where they aren't going to get up and attack you. So if you see anything you didn't kill, there's a good chance it's getting up. The Silent Hill 2 remake does it very obviously with enemy corpses laying on the ground in an area where there's a puzzle to solve or some kind of interactable, and like clockwork, when you interact with the main item in the area, they all get up. You can sometimes feel a sense of satisfaction that you saw through the game's tricks, but sometimes it's just disappointing that it did exactly what you thought it would. Your response to this will vary based on you, but familiarity can be either a pro or con based on that alone. For me personally, over time it's led to a lot of experiences feeling similar, and that's again mostly because a lot of horror media takes influences from each other. Because things that stand out as bold and unique aren't the kind of thing you can take inspiration from without people noticing. I've never seen anything like the Silent Hill 3's Mirror Room, and maybe that's a good thing. I adore and cherish the games that have me guessing what's going to happen next all the way up until the end, and I not only really like them personally, but have to rate them highly too simply because it's unique. It doesn't mean that I don't enjoy replaying Alone in the Dark, The New Nightmare another 5 times, rereading the same diary entries or getting excited to pick up the same weapons, but one is nostalgic pleasure and the other is fearful excitement, and things like desensitization and familiarity, for me at least, rob me of the latter. Desensitization used to be my worst enemy when playing games, but it's slowly turning into familiarity instead. Games feel like other games and everyone copies everyone else's homework. Feel free to tell everyone in the comments a time when a game has either desensitized you or you felt like you've played it before but you haven't. This is all I have to say today. I hope everyone is doing alright. I'm still working on Halloween and have a big update to make just before it comes out. I'll be talking about it then though. And always go check out Bumps in the middle of the night. Peace.